Welcome back, podcast friends. In today's episode, I want to break down exactly the things that we've been taught that are totally wrong about weight loss and diabetes. Now, today I'm going to go through 8 different topics and explain to you why each of those are wrong. So, here first, all I'm going to do is list the 8 different topics I want to talk about. And then after I list those, I'll go into just a little bit more explanation of why these are wrong, because this is the cure to everything. It's as crazy as that sounds, it really is. Whether you're talking about obesity, diabetes, heart disease, liver disease, kidney disease, anything you're talking about really has to do with this one thing. And so I really want to make sure that you understand what that one thing is. So today this week, I'm going to talk about why everything that we've been taught was wrong. And then next week, I'm going to talk about what to do to take care of that so we can reverse that. So first thing that I want to talk about is, first, it's not about losing weight, okay? It's about losing fat and maintaining muscle. And that is huge. And I'll talk about that in just a little bit. The next one is that's not about exercising. You are never going to exercise enough to get.
If you enjoyed this podcast,
it doesn't happen.
please hit the
And I'll
subscribe
explain
button
why that
below,
is also.
and be sure to tell someone
The
else
fourth
who may
one
want to change
is
their health
it's
path
not
as well.
about eat
And
less
remember,
calories,
if you would like to
okay?
enroll
It
in
has
our
nothing
new
to
online
do with
Thrive
calories.
Naturally
It
Transformation
has
course
everything
to help you reach your
source
new
of
improved
those
health
calories.
goals, to reverse
That's
type
what's
2
causing all the
diabetes,
issues,
feel great,
diabetes
and get off
and everything
medications,
else is the
we are
source.
here to help.
And
Just go to
it's
our
also,
website,
and this is key, this one is
drfuelit.com, and
It's
click on
not
the
about
Work With Us
getting
tab
your
at the
blood
top of the
glucose
page.
down.
We truly
Okay,
are here to help you
everybody
get off
focuses on
medications
how to
and
get
start
the
living the
blood
vibrant,
glucose down.
pain-free life that you
All
would
you
love
have
to
to
live.
focus on is what is bringing the glucose up in the first place. That is the key to everything. The next thing is it's not about getting your blood glucose down with medication. There has never, ever been a medication that can prevent, stop, or reverse type 2 diabetes. Never been one, never will be one. There's no way that works. In fact, when you take diabetic medications, it actually makes diabetes worse. And I'll explain what I mean by that in just a little bit also. Now, the next one is just the overall thought about your mindset, because it's not, don't go into this thinking I'm going to be better this year than I was last year, because all that's doing is it's trying to make you escape from the old you. And that's not what you're wanting to do. And I'll talk about that. And the last one is, instead of escaping from the old you, you need to focus on the new you. And that's where everything will change. And it does make a big difference on where you put your focus. So just before I start in the explanations of these 8 topics, I want to make sure you realize this one big thing. When you keep your insulin levels low, okay, you burn fat out of your fat cells for your energy source, okay? When you keep your insulin levels high, you store fat in your fat cells, and high insulin is the root cause of diabetes. So if you keep it low, not only are you burning the fat out of your fat cells, so you lose fat, but you also will reverse type 2 diabetes, because full fat cells is what insulin resistance is. Okay. So now those are the 8 things. Now I'll break them down individually. First, okay, like I said, it's not about losing weight. It's about losing fat. The reason I say this is because when you look at all these people on the GLP-1s, all these crazy medications, or low calorie diets, or starvation diets, or these juice cleanses, all these things, okay, do nothing about losing fat. You will never get to your fat cells. And what they actually do is they make you starve. When you go on these things, you don't eat any food. You're basically not eating anything. Remember, our bodies are made out of protein. They're made out of fat, made out of cholesterol, vitamins, minerals, and water. That is all. When you do these cleanses and when you take these GLP-1s, what happens is you're not eating anything at all. So that's true. You're not eating the glucose or the carbohydrates. Same thing. You're not eating the glucose. So when you don't eat the glucose, you are going to burn fat out of your fat cells. That is true. However, you're also not eating protein. So you're going to start eating the protein, eating your muscles for that protein. Because even though our body has a little bit of glucose stores, It doesn't store protein. Okay, that's what our muscles are for. Every single thing on our body is made out of protein. Everything, our organs, brains, skin tissue, bones, muscles, everything. But your body will preserve your organs, and it needs protein to do that. And if you're not eating it, it's going to steal it from your muscle. Because just like you probably know, you can cut off both your arms, both your legs, and you're still living. Okay, that doesn't affect your livelihood. Okay, so it's very important to realize you're doing auto cannibalism when you take these things that makes it where you're just not hungry. You just don't eat. So your body's going to eat itself from the inside out. And this is horrible, especially when you talk about eating your muscle, because muscle is going to be one of the biggest things that you're going to want to help you be able to burn more calories, produce more calories, and it's going to help save you when you get older. That's a lot of reasons why people fall when they get older, and when they fall, they tend to go in the hospital. When they tend to go to the hospital, they tend to stay there a while and maybe never come back. So you need to keep your muscle. That's very important. And you don't do it by just not eating. And so what you want to do is you want to have the things that make you lose fat, but maintain your muscle. Okay. So that's important. It's not about weight loss. It's about fat loss and maintaining muscle. The next one, it's not about exercising. Okay. It all depends on what you do. If you are a fat burner for your energy source, that means you don't eat carbohydrates all the time. Okay. You may have a few. You'll keep them low. And when you don't eat carbs, that means you don't put glucose in your blood. When you don't put glucose in your blood, you keep your insulin levels low. And remember what I said earlier, when your insulin levels are high, it forces your body to store fat. When your insulin levels are low, it forces your body to burn fat for its energy source. So if you are a fat burner, you already keep your glucose low, you already keep your insulin levels low, you're not eating carbohydrates all the time, then you're burning the fat out of your fat cells. That fat, low insulin burns fat out of fat cells, but low insulin pushes fat into your muscle cells. So now you're using the fat for your energy source, which is what you want to do. If you're a fat burner for your energy source, when you work out, you've already got your fat burning system going. So as you work out and your body needs more calories, it's going to take it from your fat cells and push that straight into your muscles. So in this case, you do lose fat and you do gain muscle. That's what you want to do. However, if you don't do it that way and you are a carb burner, like most people are, it's not your fault. This is what the food companies have done to us with all their lies, with a fake marketing food pyramid and our dietary guidelines. If you look at when everything started, our diabetes rates went up, obesity rates went up, cardiovascular, kidney disease, liver disease, brain disease, everything went up right after our new dietary guidelines came out that was telling everybody that eating fat is what makes you fat. You have to eat low fat, no fat foods. That killed us. And then they go even further and say, here's this marketing pyramid, food pyramid that you're supposed to eat, and it's all carbs. It's all what is killing us now. And you can look at it just by looking at when did all these cases go up. Okay. So when you're a carb burner, you eat carbohydrates. Okay. If you're going to go on a marathon or something, you carb load. So you put all this glucose into your blood. When you put glucose in your blood, your insulin levels go up. Now your insulin level is really high. And so now you're pushing glucose into the muscles, but you're also pushing glucose into the fat. So you're sitting there and you're popping out all this insulin because of all this glucose you put. And then when you're done with whatever you're doing, whatever exercise you're doing, and you sit down, you have all this insulin and it keeps trying to put all that glucose in your muscles and your fat cells and your stored cells. And what happens is it overshoots and your glucose goes low, and then you get very hungry. So what do you tend to do when you're a carb burner? You reach for more carbs. What's that do? Pushes your insulin level up again. So exercise can help or it can hurt. It depends on whether you use carbohydrates for your energy source or fat for your energy source. And that's what we'll talk about next week. So the key to everything here, it's not about the calories. It's about the calorie source. Okay. So again, when you have high insulin, okay, that means you have high blood glucose. So when you have high blood glucose, your body produces insulin. Your insulin tells your liver to turn all that glucose into fat in the form of triglycerides. Then it has to get all that fat out of your liver. So you increase your VLDLs, because VLDLs and LDLs, those are just I call them fat mobiles. Those are just, all those are transportation devices, little protein transportation devices that carries the fat, the triglycerides and cholesterol all around your body to all the places that fat is used. And fat is used in all over your body. So fat is extremely vital. It's not like we've been taught. Food companies tell us that fat's bad. Drug companies tell us cholesterol bad. This isn't the case. There's much more to it. So when you keep your high insulin levels, you're just storing fat in your fat cells. Okay. When your insulin levels are low, now you can burn your fat for your fuel. That's the key to everything, if you remember that. Next, it's not about burning off your calories that you take in. Okay. It's not about calories. And just to put this in perspective, okay, when you work out a very weightlifting exercise, you're going to sit there and you're popping all these weights for an hour. You may burn somewhere on 400 to 800 calories. Most people don't do extremely heavy weightlifting for an hour. Okay. So whatever exercise you're doing is probably going to be a way less than 400 to 1800 or 400 to 800 calories. Just your basal metabolic rate, but the energy that your body uses, what it takes just for you to sleep. So that means your brain's functioning, your heart's pumping, your lungs are breathing, your GI tract is going, your blood vessels are pumping. You have stuff going on inside your body all the time. We're constantly tearing down cells, making new cells. So we burn through, just you sleeping for 24 hours, we burn through about 2,400 calories. Okay. So that means that just by resting, you're burned through 3 times the amount of calories you're going to get. And that's saying that you're doing an 800 calorie workout, which we already said most people don't. That's an hour long of a huge, heavy weightlifting. Okay. So just your basal metabolic rate is going to be 2,400 calories. Now, if you look at the stores of our glucose versus the stores of our fat, we do store glucose in our body. About 10% of our liver, which only comes about 400 calories. That's it. And then we have about 2,000 calories in our muscles. And the calories that are, the glucose that's in our muscles, they're glycogen stores. And that's only good for that one skeletal muscle. So you're not really using that for all your energy needs in your basal metabolic rate. But altogether, if you look at all the glucose stores you have in the liver, your blood, and your muscles, because in your blood, you only have about 2 teaspoons of sugar. That's all you've got. So you don't have very many calories in there at all. So if you look at all that, all your stored muscle, that would be enough to keep you alive for 24 hours. That's why when you eat glucose for your energy source, when you eat glucose all the time, your insulin levels are going to go up and down and up and down. And when they go up and start pushing your glucose way down, and that's when you start getting hypoglycemic. That's when you get lightheaded. And that's when you say, oh my gosh, I'm hungry. I need to eat something else. So you reach for more carbs and you just start the cycle again. Okay. That's why your stored glucose in your liver and in your muscles are only supposed to be there for your fight or flight. That's all you need for is your stress, because you want quick access to your energy. If you're walking along the street and something happens, say you see a car wreck and you have to run over there to see if anybody needs help or whatever, you need quick energy. And that's going to come from your glucose stores. That's when you get stressed. When you get stressed, you release your cortisol, your stress hormone. Cortisol tells your liver to take glycogen and put that into glucose and put that in your blood. Okay, that's what our stored glucose is supposed to be for. But because of our dietary guidelines, it came out in 1977 telling everybody that eating fat is fat and you're supposed to eat mostly carbohydrates. What's happened is now, as soon as, just like I said, as soon as you eat this, all of a sudden you get hungry, you eat more. And so we never, ever get to the fat that's in our fat cells, because even with a big stress like that, all you're going to be doing is burn through your glucose and your glucose stores. You never get to your fat. And that's why people are eating all the time, because they're always going through their glucose. That's the only energy they have. They keep their insulin levels high constantly, so they never burn their fat. All they do is make more fat in their fat cells. And remember, we only have 2 teaspoons full of glucose in our blood. That's all we have. And surprisingly enough, back in 1965, okay, that was what was estimated was the average glucose intake, sugar intake that we did was 2 teaspoons full per person per day. In 1965, 2 teaspoons of sugar per day. Fast forward to 2015, that's gone from 2 to 65 teaspoons of sugar per person per day that we're eating right now because of our food system, because of all this man-made chemical-based food that's killing us. It's all glucose. Everything that you buy in a box, bottle, and can is glucose. It's all carbohydrates. So all this glucose is basically making us glucose toxic. You just don't realize it. So think about it. It was 2 teaspoons in 1965, 65 teaspoons in 2015, and you know it's higher than that now. Okay. That's a 32-fold increase. Think of anything that you can eat, anything you do, and you think, oh, I'm going to eat 32 times that amount. Your body can't handle that with anything, and especially can't do it with glucose because of how it affects your insulin and how insulin and high glucose and inflammation causes the organ damage of every single organ in your body. Okay, 32 times. The only reason, if you would eat that much in one day and all of a sudden pass over and die, everybody would understand, oh, that must be a bad thing to do. But that's not what happens, because what happens is when you eat that, you turn all that excess glucose into triglycerides. Therefore, if you have triglycerides, quit eating carbohydrates, because that's where triglycerides come from. So it turns it into triglycerides and it stores that as fat. And so you're constantly eating and you're constantly storing this as fat. The problem is, even though you just have a little bit of glucose stores, 10% of your liver and 1% of each skeletal muscle, you have fat cells all over your body. And that's there for a reason, because that's where we're supposed to store the energy that we use all the time. Because centuries ago, people couldn't eat all the time. Anytime they wanted, they can just go grab something out of the refrigerator. Okay. There could be days that they may not be able to eat. So God made us so we have energy stores on board. And it's not glucose. We just talked about that. That'd keep you alive for 24 hours if you're just sleeping. If you're moving around, we needed energy. So that's why we're supposed to use the energy in our fat cells. However, since we have so many making these little triglycerides, and you keep storing them in all your fat cells. When the fat cell gets full, that one is insulin resistant. So it just keeps filling all the fat cells you have over and over. That's why prediabetes is actually, it takes 10, 20, 30, 40 years before you ever see a high glucose, because prediabetes is not an A1C of 5.7 to 6.4. That's a marketing technique to get more diabetic drugs so you can actually have more people with diabetes. And I'll talk about that in another podcast, and I already have also. What happens is you don't realize that you're glucose toxic because you're filling up all your fat cells. And once they're full, now that's when everything happens. That's when now you start storing fat around your liver, start storing fat around your heart, storing fat around your kidneys, everything. You start damaging everything because you have high glucose and you have high insulin and you have inflammation because you're eating the same kind of food that causes all of that. And that's what you do not want. You want to avoid that at all costs. And it used to be, because of the fat cell, because we only ate 2 teaspoons full of sugar per day. Okay. Back then, it took a long time. So we never saw obesity. We never saw type 2 diabetes until patients were up in their 50s, 60s, because it took that long to fill up the fat cells. But now that we're eating 65 teaspoons per person per day, and it's getting worse, we're filling our fat cells up very quickly. And it's happening in our children because they aren't tall yet. They don't have as many fat cells, but they're still eating this amount of glucose. So they're filling up quick. And that's why we're seeing kids in their teens. And now, as horrible as it is, even less than 10, we're seeing type 2 diabetes in these kids. We're killing our kids by giving them all this sugar, all these carbohydrates all the time. We're killing our children, and that has got to stop. So that's why we used to never see it, because we never ate all the glucose, and now we're seeing it younger, and that is horrible. I've been a doctor of pharmacy for 35 years. When I started being in pharmacy, I'm a pediatric pharmacist. That's what I did my residency in. We never saw type 2 diabetes. In our pediatric population, we just didn't have type 2 diabetic patients. But now if you go to the hospital, you're seeing type 2 diabetic patients in the pediatric ward all the time. Okay. I've seen this from experience, and it is sad. It is horrible what's going on. And everybody knows. You can just look around and see how the obesity has just gotten rampant. And remember, obesity is not about how you look. I don't care how you look. I don't care. Okay. That's up to you. Beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. It is If you are obese, you are sick. You are insulin resistant, even though you don't have a high glucose yet. It just means you haven't quite filled up all your fat cells yet. You have more to go. But once you fill all those up, then you'll be diabetic. Okay. So when you see somebody who's obese, or if you're obese, that is a health issue. That's not a looks issue. That's up to you and whoever you hang around with. But health issue, that's a fact. That's a fact. If you're obese, you are unhealthy. You do have insulin resistance. You just don't have it quite full enough. And that's what's crazy about the medications that we give. Okay. And that's what I'll be talking about next. But the other thing, remember, like I said, when you use glucose, your insulin makes your glucose go down, and that makes you extremely hungry. And so that makes you want to eat more. When you're using fat, remember 2,400 calories stored glucose. Now let's look at fat. In 1 pound of fat, you have 4,000 calories. Okay. So in 1 pound of fat, you have way more calories, over about twice the amount of calories you have in all your glucose stores put together. Okay. That is good. The drug companies and food companies try to make that look like that's bad. Oh, fat's bad. It has 9 calories per gram and only 4 calories per gram for carbohydrates. It has nothing to do with that. Because they always try to take your eye off the ball. Just like diabetes, they have you look at high blood glucose, and that's just a symptom. It's high insulin. And why do they? I'll get into that in just a little bit. Okay. But so you have 4,000 calories in one pound of fat. So if you're 10 pounds overweight, that means you have 40,000 extra calories on board. Okay. You are not going to burn these extra calories by exercising. We just talked about that. You'll probably never get to it unless you're already a fat burner. Okay. So the good thing about that is if you're not eating carbohydrates and you keep your insulin levels low, you're constantly burning that fat out of your fat cells and pushing that into your muscle cells. Okay. You're always burning that fat out of your fat cells. By doing that, you don't get hungry. You don't get out of energy. My last meal was 6 o'clock last night, and it's 3 o'clock the next day. I did have a good heavy 1 hour lifting that I did today. We went for a walk. We have not eaten anything. I've got plenty of energy and I'm not hungry. Okay. That's how you can tell if you were a fat burner, because I already have all the energy I need. So I don't get tired. I'm not hungry. That's why you get hungry, is because your body says there's nutrients that I need. It's either protein, fat, cholesterol, vitamins, or minerals. When it's lacking those, it's going to make you hungry and you're going to eat. When you're eating protein and you're eating fat and you've got fat in your fat cells to burn, that's the answer to everything. That's the answer to perfect health. That's what you want. Okay. We've been duped into thinking that it's something else. So let's look at the medication. Okay. I told you that it's not about getting your glucose down with medication. Medication actually makes it worse. The reason why I say that is, remember, type 2 diabetes is the root cause is insulin resistance. That's having too high of insulin for too long. And what that does, the actual site is the fat cell. You fill the fat cell up so much it can't take any more. But anyway, that's insulin resistance. You keep your insulin levels too high for too long. So what you should be doing is looking at your insulin levels to see if you're pre-diabetic, because when you're healthy, you have glucose levels and your insulin levels are low. They're both low. As you go through and you keep eating carbohydrates, you keep eating glucose over and over again, it starts taking more and more insulin to keep your glucose low. Okay. So you're pre-diabetic for a long time, for 10, 20, 30 years before you actually fill up all your fat cells. So all your fat cells are insulin resistant, not just a few of them. Once they all become insulin resistant, now you see the glucose goes up. So what do medications do? The pharmaceutical company, they have you look at the glucose. Oh no, your glucose is going up. You're diabetic or you're pre-diabetic because your A1C is 5.7 to 6.4. So what they do, they give you more medication, which is why they do that in the first place. They wanted more people to be on medication. So now they give you a diabetic medication. You know how diabetic medications work? One of two ways. They either cause your pancreas to produce more insulin, or they make your cells more sensitive to the insulin. That's how they work. So they actually make the root cause worse. Okay, that's what I'm trying to get you to understand. Now, there is one class that doesn't affect the insulin, and it just affects your glucose excreting out through the kidneys. That's good because it doesn't affect the insulin, but it's bad because it affects your kidneys, because now you're pushing all this glucose through your kidneys that it never was supposed to handle. And that actually ends up causing a lot more problems in the body and in your kidneys than you ever wanted. So that's why you do not focus on getting the blood glucose down. You focus on not getting that up in the first place. That is the whole key to what you're wanting to do. And how do you get it up in the first place? Okay. So remember, everybody, everyone, you look online, you look at all these places, you go to your doctor, you go to everybody, and they all, how do we get the glucose down? How do you get your glucose down? Nobody's talking about this other side. How did it get up in the first place? How did it get up? There's only two ways your blood glucose goes up. One way is it gets the stored glucose, which happens under stress. Okay. Acute stress, you'll get some. Chronic stress, you'll be getting your glucose up also. But usually you just have a stress, you had that fight or flight, and then you come back down again and you start using your fat. That's where it's supposed to. The only other way that your blood glucose goes up is because you eat it. Okay. That's all you got to do. If you just stop eating glucose, your blood glucose is going to drop, period. And if your blood glucose drops, you don't have to be on that diabetic medication, because that's all it's doing is make you drop the glucose on. That's all it's doing, is looking at dropping the glucose, but it's doing by making your insulin higher. If you don't eat it, your blood glucose isn't going to go up, but neither is your insulin. So you keep them both down. And you're going to keep inflammation out of your body, because that usually comes from all this chemical-based man-made food also. If you're not eating that, which you wouldn't be, because if you were, your glucose would be up and your insulin would be up. So if you don't eat that stuff, and all fruits and vegetables, they do it too. Some have more glucose than others, and that's another topic. I'm not against fruits and vegetables. God-made food is fine. Man-made food is toxic. Okay. So if you don't eat it, your glucose doesn't go up. If your glucose doesn't go up, your insulin doesn't go up. So you're keeping everything down, and you start teaching your body how to start eating your fat for your fuel source. So that's why I said that's what medications do. They actually make it worse because they work by increasing your insulin. And that's why I said it's not about bringing glucose down. It's about not getting it up in the first place. Okay. So now you know that's the nutrition part. And just real quick, last two things. When you think about changing your mind, you've got to change your thoughts about things. It is not about being better than you were last year. Okay. That's not what you really want to work at. Because if you say that, it's like you're trying to escape from the old you, and it actually puts you in a stress situation, because you don't want to be that way. You don't want to be that way. I want to be this way, but don't focus on that. That puts you in survival mode. That's what you're trying to survive. You're trying to not be that. And that just puts chronic stress on you, which actually makes your glucose go up again and can defeat your purpose. Because again, when your glucose goes up, your insulin goes up. When your insulin goes up, turn the glucose into triglycerides, and it stores it in your fat cells. So chronic stress is not good. What you want to do instead is you want to focus on the new you. You want to say it's about having less fat next year than you have right now. It's about having more energy next year than you have right now. It's about being on less medications or no medications. It's about reversing your diabetes. And you can totally reverse diabetes, even though I was taught all the way through school, went to school for 12 years, went to college for 12 years, did a residency, and I practiced for 35 years. Never was I told any of this. I always thought we had to do this with medication. Okay. So you can reverse diabetes. You can reverse rheumatoid arthritis. You can reverse so many things if it hasn't gone too bad. So it's not about beating yourself up about you're so mad because you should have done this last year and now you want to do it. And then you're going into it with the wrong mindset. What you want to do is you want to build confidence. Say, yes, I can do it. And then as you start doing it, you start building up self-esteem. You start feeling better about yourself. When you lose fat, you get off medications, you reverse your type 2 diabetes, you have more energy, you feel great. You are going to be an example to your friends, to your family, to people you don't even know. You're going to be an example to them. And that's when you truly feel good, because that's why God put us here. I heard this the other day and I thought it was wonderful. The 3 H's. First, you're supposed to hurt. You have to go through hurt. We all go through hurts, but then you have to heal, learn how to heal, figure out how to heal. Once you heal from that hurt, now you can help others. Okay. And that's the key, helping others. So it's hurt, heal, help. And that's exactly what we did. That's exactly why I'm doing this. I was obese. I was very sickly. Okay. I figured out I got the weight off. I'm not on any medication. I'm 63 years old. I'm not on any meds. I will never be on a medication if I can help it. And most of the times I can. So, but I've got the energy. I did hurt and now I've healed. Now this is my chance to help. I'm trying to let you guys know there is an answer to this, and it is very simple. May not be easy depending on how sugar addicted, how carbohydrate addicted you are, but there's still ways to get off of that. And we can talk about that as well. But so you want to heal from this because that's going to help you to be able to help others in the future. So that's all I've got for right now. This time I told about why we're in the situation we're on. To next week, I'm going to talk about what to do to get out of this situation. Okay, both for weight loss and also for reversing type 2 diabetes. And the crazy thing is, it's the same answer. Whether you say you have high blood pressure, you have kidney disease, you have liver disease, you have brain disease, whatever, the answer is the exact same, because the 3 columns of disease, the 3 things that when you have these 3, you start deteriorating every single cell in your body: high glucose, high insulin, high inflammation. When you stop these man-made products and being toxic on the amount of carbohydrates that you eat, people eat way more carbohydrates than they should. That's where you go from 2 teaspoons of glucose up to 65 teaspoons of glucose. We eat too many carbohydrates. When you learn that and you stop doing that, all your organs can get better. If the damage isn't too bad, you can reverse so much, and you definitely can reverse type 2 diabetes, which is the problem of all this. So what you want to do is you want to put all your focus not on exercise, not on medication. Now, if you have a high blood glucose, you do need medication because you do not want a high blood glucose. And I'll talk about that later on, not in this podcast, but another podcast. High blood glucose tears up every single protein in your body. So you do not want a high blood glucose. So if you're diabetic, I'm not saying stop your medications. I would never say that. I'm saying get your glucose down by not eating it. Once your glucose is down because you're not eating it, now you don't need to be on the diabetic medications. You do need to talk to your doctor. You need your doctor's guidance in coming down off your diabetic medication. You don't need his permission because he's not going to understand this. That's not about him, but none of us do. Nobody in the medical field understands this unless you get over to the nutrition side, and physicians get 0 nutrition in school, maybe 1 semester in school. Okay. They don't teach nutrition. So all we learn about diabetes is through the drug companies, and all the drug companies do is focus on glucose to get it down. Just come to find out the reason they have you do that is because they're trying to sell more diabetic medications. It's crazy. So anyway, all you have to do is focus on not putting all these carbohydrates in your mouth, and you have 100% control over that. So that's all I've got for this week. Next week, I'll go just a little bit deeper on exactly what you can do to actually reverse all these situations we were just talking about. So for now, thank you again so much for listening. And until next time, stay nourished and stay well. If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the subscribe button below and be sure to tell someone else who may want to change their health path as well. And remember, if you would like to enroll in our new online Thrive Naturally Transformation course to help you reach your new improved health goal, to reverse type 2 diabetes, feel great, and get off medications, we are here to help. Just go to our website, drstevehewlett.com, and click on the Work With Us tab at the top of the page. We truly are here to help you get off medications and start living the vibrant, pain-free life that you would love to live.